No.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Never had that close to testifying. Oh.
Hey, Jim, can you hear us?
Now I can.
Okay, I unmuted myself.
You had me on mute. That was probably a really good idea.
Yeah, that's what it was. Let me share the screen now.
Jim, you look like a superstar on that big screen.
That's what Mike used.
That's where you took the comfy seat.
A lot of noise from the crowd. Yeah, it probably will help.
Very nice house, or at least it was.
It isn't. Yeah.
I'm here all the time. That's right. So
It is now. It is.
nice and quiet.
So, yeah, that keeps- and it's dead. Hold on.
Yeah,
I'm gone.
I'm well. Thank you.
He's still taking care of things.
Why don't we give the mayor his gavel? What's up with that? Just-
It's not official.
This guy remember locking the doors again.
Yeah, the double tap.
That way you're not being.
Well, I just unlocked him for the
No,
resident.
we don't need to do that. We double,
Oh, yeah, I guess I don't have my key
I
fob.
already
Yeah.
unlocked them.
Nick already locked them. Yeah.
Oh, did you?
I already double tapped them.
I did the caveman way.
Never said double.
I like.
That's a different kind of double tap.
Right?
Yeah.
He's not in the camera, so it's that way.
You have to be careful when you might be on record.
Right.
People have gotten into trouble in there.
Sometimes that's something you're right.
Let's see. Penny Cren.
Excited, that'll be a really nice addition. Or if they needed it out of the way.
Yeah. Construction illustrator.
I think this is the furthest we've gotten the alphabet on the agenda.
We were going to be at M, but one of them backed out, so they're going to come back next time. April 19th might be close too, so.
You can do A, B, and C all at once. Yeah.
If you approve of them all, you can consolidate.
7:00, call this meeting to order. Gonna do the pledge. We're here. You still remember the words?
Please allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good.
Hey, roll call, Al Dyke. Here. Nancy Rondell. John Cox. Here. John Leo.
Here.
And Matt Boguera.
There.
We do have a quorum.
Very good. Open session minutes from March 1st. Comments, changes?
I read through them. They look clean to me. I would make the motion to approve.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Closed session minutes?
Same, I make a motion to approve.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Bill committee?
It looked good. Highlight it looked great.
Kyle, I think it's great.
I make a motion.
No, second.
For paying the bills?
Aye.
Opposed?
Yeah, that shaves a few minutes off right there.
Moving right along. Citizens comment?
I just got one really quick, really quick. And I waited until we were in person. So I talked to you about our Cli Accreditation that we had back in June, the on-site. And we received our certificate from Cli. And just so you know, there's only 3% of the agencies in the United States that were accredited. We were one of 3%. We're the smallest one in Michigan with only having 6 full-time officers. Now, since the incident in Minneapolis, they've pushed accreditation on all law enforcement agencies. And now Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police they have an accreditation process as well. So now more and more agencies are becoming accredited. But back in June, or we've been doing this since Chief Branson had it in 2010, I believe. But this is a plaque that they sent us. Normally, pre-COVID, they would actually come and they would present this plaque to us at a meeting. So I just wanted to see, this is what your money's paying for.
Congratulations.
More in essence, to make sure that our policies and procedures are up to snuff and that we're doing things the right way. That we have steps in place, so hopefully nothing bad will happen. So, all right, thank you.
Well done.
Yes, good job, Kyle. We have a comment from Bonnie Culp. Says, way to go, Kyle. You and your officers are the best. Thank you for all you do.
Any other citizen comment on the computer?
Oh, I have to check YouTube. That's right.
Now, this is Tyler Hoff and Tyler Swiss. They're a big contribution of this, so just to give them the credit.
The rookies.
No other comments that I see.
Guess we're on to the city manager section.
Great, thanks. Great to see all of you guys in person again. The first item on the agenda is approving the Harbor Springs Public Schools Summer Art Show event. Of course, that was canceled last year due to COVID. This is going to be their 45th annual. They're going to do it on July 4th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. There'll be some requests for staff assistance, such as mowing the grass, closing off West Main Street, and some officers present to assist with parking attendees. We ran this by Chief Knight, DPW Director, and everyone is fine with these requests. The map is there. You see the map on the screen. That's their booth layout. We think all this is great as it's back in the city. Of course, I recommend approval, of course, with all events, that if there's any changes in social gathering orders or anything like that, that they would have to follow those new rules.
They'll have to follow whatever rules are in effect.
At the time.
Whatever they may be.
Exactly.
I think it's a great idea. It's really comforting to see some normalcy returning. So I would make a motion that we approve it.
Second there. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. One down.
Moving on to 3B, Festival of the Book event. Of course, the same situation. This did not happen last year because of COVID. This year, they're requesting to also do it on some public spaces, potentially Marina Park and Zorn Park. They may or may not have a tent. The idea is to use these parks for, obviously with outdoor parks, you have more social distancing and just safer in general. And so they may need to use a PA system, or like they likely will use a PA system. So that'll be something to consider. But it's a daytime event in the end of September. So it shouldn't be much of a disturbance to any neighbors in that area because it's during the day. They expect to have 1,000 or more visitors based on previous attendance records, so 1,000 visitors per day. As I mentioned, they'll be using a PA system, so they'll have to use some city electricity, and they're also requesting police presence. And Kyle has seen that and is fine with that. We recommend approval based on the similar conditions of they must adhere to any social gathering orders that are in effect at that time. I do think that they should also present staff with a finalized schedule and set up display of how they plan to set up the tent and everything when it gets near that date. Right now, they didn't provide a map or anything like that, but I think something like that would be useful for us, just so we know.
Yeah, no, looking forward to
That's
it.
great.
I'll make a motion that we allow the Festivus of the book.
Festivus.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Great, moving on. Knights of Columbus Tootsie Roll Drive, another repeat offender. There are two separate requests by the Knights of Columbus. One is a Tootsie Roll Drive. They're planning to do it on the weekend of March 26th and October 8th. They'll be located at Gurney's, Kebble's, the IGA, and Ace Hardware. They've done this frequently. This is something we routinely approve. The other one is a request to sell food at Holy Childhood Church on the 4th of July. Historically, we have allowed nonprofits to sell food on public or private property on that holiday without any greater kind of requirements other than council approval, or city approval. So I recommend that we approve both of those per normal.
Again, subject to whatever restrictions may be in place.
Yes, I would say that, except this is different than the typical event because, like, for example, on Holy Childhood Church, that's private property. We can't really,
Right.
So, I mean,
But the
I'm
others,
assuming 4th of July is going to happen this year.
yes, that's as well. But yes, that's fine.
no, another return to normalcy. I'd make a motion to approve it. We have in the past.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Chirps.
Everybody stay with the team.
Item 3D, Rebecca Otto from United Way, Shaw-Rem United Way is here to present on general issues in community. Particularly, this one is focusing on housing issues, I believe. Alice is a term, assistance low income. Well,
I'll explain it.
oh, she'll explain it. But this is a good opportunity as we're going through the master plan update. The master plan has heard a little bit about this from another organization, but I feel that it's a good way for the city council to know that United Way, Shaw-Rem United Way is here, a little bit on what they do and for the community and any kind of ways that we could be of assistance or learn from what they're working on and maybe find some areas of collaboration or maybe incorporate some of that in some of the actions we decide to take forward, whether it's through our master plan or other actions we take as a city. So in that sense, Rebecca has prepared a presentation and I have it here. Let me just adjust my screen, but she'll begin her presentation and give you an overview of why she is here today. So thanks, Rebecca.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for letting me come here and present to you. My name is Rebecca Otto, and I am the interim executive director for Shaw-Rem United Way. How many of you are familiar at all with Shaw-Rem United Way? Okay. So we've been around for over 75 years. Obviously, we've changed iterations over the years in what we do. But every United Way has this same creed, which is United Way fights for the health, education, and financial stability of every person in every community. So one of the reasons that I show up to meetings like this is because there is a segment of the population that you are serving that is at home or working a second job or taking this opportunity to take care of their families. And so they're not able to be in front of you to tell you what their concerns are. So that's where I step in and I'm able to give a voice to these people. So if we can go to the next slide. So what we've normally done in the past is we have been a fundraising arm in the community. When community chests were happening and there weren't a lot of nonprofits, there would be this one place that all the money could gather, and then United Way would pull in citizens and we would do citizens review panels and distribute the money to those agencies that ask for funds. So that's largely what we've also been doing at Charm United Way. And as we get grant applications, we look through these three areas. Are they focusing on the health, education, and or financial stability of those that are most in need in our community? So there are things that we support like Manna Food Project or the Women's Resource Center's Project Free or the after school program for YMCA, because they're hitting on a lot of those different areas and they're serving underserved populations. So the next one. So the thing that gives us some focus about whether we're doing good or whether we need to do more is something called the ALICE report. And it comes out of United for ALICE, which is a division of the United Way in Northern New Jersey. And they started this report there, looking at the population and saying, we can clearly see where the federal poverty line is. That's something that we can figure out. And there are all these social safety networks that help provide supports for that population. But then there's this population that's hovering just above that, but not making enough to survive in the community that they're in. So let's get a handle on what that means. So they started analyzing what they were calling the ALICE population. You go to the next one. So ALICE stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed. It's trying to address this fallacy that people that are struggling to survive are not working or that they're not trying hard enough by singling out those people who are below a household survival budget. So they don't make enough to survive in the place of their living for the cost of living, but they are working. They don't have a lot of job movement, so they can't get a raise or they can't get a promotion. So they're kind of stuck where they are in their job. And they also don't have any assets so they can sell off in an emergency. So this segment of the population is one emergency away from having everything kind of snowball, starting to lose their home, all these other stuff going to play. So when you start looking at the entire population and you know you can identify the federal poverty line, and then you can identify what this ALICE threshold is, you get an idea of how many people are below the ALICE threshold, which gives you the percentage of your population that's struggling to survive on a daily basis. Go to the next one. So these people are working at the IGA. There are some that are working in stores downtown. And so we have the ability to understand that for our community. This is now the third ALICE report that we've had in 6 years. We have another one that's due out next year, which will give us a better idea of where we've come since the last one. They come out every 2 years. And then the next report that comes out in the next 2 years will have new census information and it will be post-pandemic. So it will give us a different picture as well. So if we're starting to look specifically at the numbers here in our community, well, in Michigan overall, it's 43% that are below that number. So 43% of Michiganders don't make enough to survive. They're one economic crisis away from losing everything. And in Charlevoix and Emmett County, we have an average of 40% that are below the ALICE threshold. But if you go into the next one, which is Emmett County and Harbor Springs, you'll see that Emmett County has stayed pretty much the same at 37% and then down to 32 in the last report. And then Harbor Springs has hovered right around the state average. When I talked to the research center and I asked them, when you're looking at trends, what can you anticipate will happen in a community? They said, look at your highest density population, your biggest metropolis that you have, for us, City of Petoskey. Look at the trends that they're having, and that's what the rest of your county will do. Because whatever direction that's going will start to spread out into the communities around it. So the City of Tootsie is at 55% right now. So that means that over half of the population that's in the City of Tootsie is struggling to put food on the table or pay their utilities or get their kids to childcare or just make it work. So then when you look at Harbor Springs, not that great either, to be realizing that So many people that you're interacting with in a day don't have the space and the capacity to focus on their jobs as much as they could, or focus on their lives as much as they could, because they're constantly trying to figure out where they're going to make this money to be able to make ends meet. And as we address in the Alice report, these aren't people who are sitting around waiting for somebody to hand them something. They're working, sometimes multiple jobs, relying on one car to get around. And if something falls out of place in there, they're gonna lose everything. Go to the next. So we like to focus on the ways that we can make a difference in the community. Obviously, the easiest way is to go to somebody and say, give us a donation and we will help make a difference in the community. But it's bigger than that. We have to advocate for those who can't speak for themselves. And that's why I show up to meetings like this. That's why I go down to Lansing and advocate for things in policy in the legislature that's going to make a difference for people who are struggling. And that's the thing that I try to empower everybody that I give a presentation to. Each one of you has an audience in your friends, in your family, in your circles, and you have the ability to facilitate change in your community by being aware of this and by making other people in your circles aware of this as well. And obviously the volunteering aspect of it is a little challenging right now because we don't have a lot of ability to volunteer. And Food Project and all of those other ones where we would normally send people to help are scaling back and trying to mitigate any spread of COVID. So we have to get creative. We've done things like drives for letters to people who are in congregate living facilities, so that they're getting some kind of touch point and human contact as they're being in isolation right now. So there are creative ways that we can get around this, but it's important to be focusing on what it is that we can do. And so you here, as decision makers in the city of Harbor Springs, can take this information into account as you're working on the master plan, as you're working with departments inside City Hall, and really take to heart what it is that you're doing and how these decisions are going to affect what is close to half of your population. And how are you going to make a change and shift so that that number continues to go down instead of going up. You go to the next one. So this is something that kind of stood out to me when we were starting this pandemic. This idea that we're all in the same storm, but we don't all have the same boat. Some of us are maneuvering through this in a pretty cushy kayak. That's not going to help in a storm. It's going to be quite detrimental. And other people are going to be in a yacht, and they're not going to feel it as much. They have the ability to make things better for themselves. And there is a large portion of our population that is just not that lucky. And so if you have the ability, what are you doing to provide for somebody else who's weathering the same storm as we are? There's a great quote by Terry Eagleton that I like to share. Genuine equality means not treating everyone the same, but attending equally to everyone's different needs. As you're looking at the things that you can do as policymakers, try to put it through the lens of everyone that's in your community and what their individual needs are, and not try to come up with blanket solutions that are going to fit a single type of population. And one of the things that we at United Way have committed to doing is we have a service called 211. Randy's familiar with it. It is basically an online and phone referral line that people can call if they're looking for resources in the community. We've taken great pains over the last 2 years to make sure that we have found everything that's in the community and put it into this database. Our call center is located in Muskegon right now. It's available 24/7. People can call that line and say, I'm looking for food. And the trained information and referral specialists on the other end of the line are trained to be able to pull out any other needs that that family might be experiencing, whether it's lack of healthcare, whether it's housing help that they need, and try to put them in contact with any of the agencies in the community that are helping. So that's something that we as United Way are committed to making sure that this service is available to our community. We reinstated it 2 years ago after a 3-year hiatus, and we were the last 2 counties in the entire state of Michigan to get it back. So that is one small way that we are making sure that our community has the tools that they need to get back on the feet. So if you have any questions, I did include in the packet the latest statistics for Emmett County for the Alice report, and I will be giving Victor the next report when it comes out next week, so you guys can have the next set of data on this. Does anybody have any questions for me?
I have one question thank you for the presentation. It was really wonderful. Alice, so it says that it incorporates the households that they're talking about households. So when we see the percentages of like 44% of people in Harbor Springs are below that threshold, is it of households or is it of people that they change that number into number of people?
It's households.
It's households, so 44% of households. Okay.
Yeah, and when you look at the below Alice threshold, that is including the federal poverty line, like you
Yep.
can see on there, it'll include at the bottom. So then you're looking at a gap there, you know, that is 21% to 31% of households that are below that household survival budget. This year, this report here was the first one that included technology as a part of a household survival budget, because there was this realization, which we can now see played out with the pandemic and people needing to access either employment or schooling through the internet, that it has become as essential as some of the other utilities that we have. So the subsequent reports will continue to include technology as part of that.
When you say Harbor Springs, are you talking about just the city of Harbor Springs? Or
This
are
is
you
the city
talking
of Harbor Springs.
just in the
Yeah,
city?
if you go to the second page of that report there, you'll see it broken out by municipality. Okay. So then you can dial into other.
So that's within city limits.
Within and year-round residents?
Yep.
Is that?
Yes, year round.
Yep. So they showed here 513 households. It's a little small, but 513 households is what they took for Harbor Springs City. So that's kind of
And that's
correlates with.
2017 point in time data.
Yep.
With the 2019 report. So the data has been analyzed 2 years before.
And just some feedback on the call center. I've worked with Siemens and Paul. It's a wonderful resource
Good, I'm glad to
for
hear that.
people to access. We're really struggling to find, you know, we do what we can, but we don't have the resources to do what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's a huge help
Thank
to
you.
those who really need it.
That's good to hear. The other thing that we've been really pleased at is that it has been a very nimble service. When the schools shut down last year and all the schools were trying to put into play all the solutions for meals.
Sure.
And they were changing as they were finding out where that household concentrations were and where the drop off should be. We were able to call them and have it changed within 24 hours. So people that were calling looking for those resources were getting as accurate information as we possibly could get.
That's a great service. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Well, I'll stick around for the rest of the meeting, so if you think of anything else, please let me know. Thank you for the opportunity.
Appreciate it very much. Thanks, Rebecca. Yep. Great. And yeah, so, and I'm sure we will have more discussions like this at the planning commission level as well. We've had a couple presentations about housing needs and lower income needs. So I think this is just another thing to add to our toolkit.
Look at the statistics with tennis.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, moving on to item 3E, a DDA update on the parking revenue opportunity at the Spring Street. So in the past couple of DDA meetings, they've been discussing the possibility of using that parking lot at Spring Street and Spring and Third. It's the Spring Street lot that goes up to the Bluff Boardwalk, and I've included a map general because there's 3 parking lots there. And so we're talking about this one right here that's circled, that's the public lot. The possibility of utilizing that city-owned lot for a couple of reasons. One goal would be to free up parking spaces on Main Street that are utilized by business owners potentially. And so they get them off Main Street so visitors could use those parking spots. And another opportunity would be to potentially earn some revenue off of that lot. As some background, the city purchased that lot and made improvements to it with the general fund amounting to about $300,000. And I did talk to Jim Raymer about any technical legalities about, transferring the DDA using that lot to make revenue. And he said that was totally fine as long as the council authorizes any transfers of revenue. So I'll have Kathy Breitner, I believe, is on here from the DDA chair to present on what the presentation she provided and what the DDA found. They did a survey. My three questions just for council going into this presentation is, the first one, just to keep this in the back of your mind while you hear Kathy speak on this, is first question is, do we want to turn this lot into a long-term paid parking lot? So that's the first question to consider. The second one is, if yes, does the council want to work with the DDA, enter some sort of arrangement with them to manage the lot and share the revenue? And then the third would be, if yes to that, what would that arrangement look like? And what would that agreement look like? So those are the 3 questions I think that we need to be focused on. And I'll give the floor to Kathy, who's on Zoom because she's calling in from somewhere warmer. And I'll
I am.
I'll put her presentation on the screen. All right, Kathy, take it away.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry I'm not there. And well, actually, I'm not because I'm in California, so it's quite nice out here. Next up for us as a conversation point is what to do with this parking lot. And we began because we were asked by many, many people if we could look at a way to get employers and employees out of the CBD parking spaces, not just Main Street, but as 3rd Street as well. And it turns out there was a couple interesting twists to this. One of them was removing the cars so that there would be more places for customers to park. But the second part was a request by the employers who have employees coming in mid-afternoon to early evening, such as the restaurants, when the parking spaces are far more occupied than a morning shift would be. Many of those afternoon, evening employees just don't have an easy access to a parking spot. So with that information, we did a survey, and you've seen that. Like any survey, there was a variety of replies. We actually got back with almost everyone that we could on their responses. Some thought when we were talking about paid parking, we meant for customers. Well, that's not the case. This would be a lot where we would lease spaces to those who want to put their cars there. And we actually have more interest by this very brief survey in spaces than we have spaces. So again, a couple parts: get people off the street. We've talked about this over and over again, and it's just been an endless circle of conversation, and provide parking for employees who need it in the secondary part of the day. The revenue part definitely is there. Yes, there is potential for revenue. The DDA is willing to pay for the construction of the pad and the device the gate device. They'll have like clickers in cars. And we would also handle the administration of this. So we would do the contracts. We're ready to do this because as a DDA, we are intent on helping businesses, and this is a request that our businesses would like. So that's it in a nutshell. You've seen everything that Margot presented for you, and I'm ready for questions.
Thank you, Kathy. And to sum up those were some of my thoughts as well, the benefits. I did include, you probably read it, what the benefits and drawbacks are. Overall, I think the benefits outweigh the drawbacks. I think that the stickler is going to be that first question is do we want to create some sort of paid parking space in Harbor Springs? And that's, I think, the crucial decision to make. I think if the answer to that question is yes, then I'm all in favor for the DDA to take over the administration and then do some sort of profit revenue sharing with this. But that's that first question, I think, that needs to be really flushed out. So.
Okay, council, say something.
Space in Harbor Springs. And that's, I think, the crucial decision to make. I think if the answer to that question is yes, then I'm all in favor for the DDA to take over the administration. All right. That's that first question, I think, that needs to be really flushed out. Can we all please?
Bad idea.
Yeah.
Free up spaces. I mean, you gotta know, like the bank parking lot, the bank employees take up half the parking in front of the harbor master building, or people in that structure, kind of thing.
I've been on the parking committee and part of the DDA. It's 19 spots that 19 employees are going to park in. Where it's going to take 19 employees off the street and 19 more employees are just going to take those spots. I guess is my bounce on it.
Well, 19 is better than 38. We have no way to enforce employees parking on the streets. This is just one slight solution to part of the problem. Matt is correct. We can't solve all of it.
I guess, I mean, I've worked jobs where you've got to walk a half a mile to get to work. And I think people are, especially employees and owners, are under the idea that they can park as close to their business or job as possible. That's a benefit of working in Harbor Springs. I don't think that's the way it should be. I think we've yet to come up with a way to enforce it. I guess jokingly, I've talked to Victor about shaming people and, putting a big sign on their car. My name's Joe, I work at this real estate office, and I think I'm more important than you, the customers of Harbor Springs. I mean, that's not a practical way of doing it. But beyond that, I don't know if there's any way to get people out there, or get employees, owners off the street. And I don't know if this is really going to help in the long run of alleviating that problem. I'm for, I guess, paid parking, or making that a paid parking lot. I'd like to see, would rather see it, instead of going to employees, go to people who have upstairs apartments. There's a lot of apartments in town that don't have parking, so that they don't have to valet the parking fee. I think, just as much as the employees.
The discussions I've been involved in were never exclusively about employees or businesses. It was at worst events.
Yeah.
To the first question, I too am in support of it. I think it's an opportunity to get some parking off the street, and it's an opportunity to get the DDA some revenue, which it desperately needs. They're willing to take the responsibility and incur the cost. So if it doesn't work, they've incurred the risk, not the city. So to me, the first question, do we want to do it? I would vote yes on that. How we do it, what the contracts would look like, how would you allocate? If you, as Kathy said, there's more demand than there's supply. Well, that's a great thing from a business standpoint. From a revenue standpoint, that means that there's demand, therefore you can set some fees. How you do that would be, once they've got the green light, is then how are you going to negotiate with people who want it? So we want to answer the first question, yes, maybe. Al and Nancy, what do you think?
No, I agree. Yes, for the first question. The devil's in the details. There are a lot of ways to charge for it. What I keep coming up with my mind is I assume that the person would have exclusive use of parking space if they were to lease it. And if they're only here for 8 hours and it's daytime hours, so that space can't be used by anyone else for the rest of the night. We park there a lot when we go out to dinner. We come in at 6 o'clock and go down to the restaurants. And that just seems like a bad idea. Petoskey uses a system in some of their lots that you put a fee, you put money and your license plate number, like our boat ramp, and they've got a box there, and you can stay for as long as you pay. And the police come through every once in a while and look in the box and make sure that everybody's in the space that paid for it. But that way, they're still rotating the spaces and keeping them full, for the times when people are downtown. And I think that this program would miss that opportunity, and it would actually reduce available parking at some times of the day. So I don't think that that's the best plan. but I do think there probably is a better plan.
Because my concern on that, because we do the parking enforcement downtown, is that if we allocate those 19 spots for businesses or for residents that live down there, if they're not there, those spots are empty and they're serving nobody any purpose at all. And actually, when Al brings up the lot right by the sheriff's department over there, is that they got the kiosk and you just plug your stuff in. And I'm not saying for meters, but it is a way that we could utilize those spaces, whether the DDA pays for it or I don't care that, but we could allocate those spaces. At least it'd be used more than, because let's say nobody's going to work 7 days a week. So if that person's got that clicker and they're off 3 days a week, that spot's going to sit there vacant. It doesn't help anybody because those people that could park there are going to be parking in the street.
I agree.
Well, what about like, we're looking into this, like that reader, or like you're talking about, for those lots, we could use it for marina park down there and stuff like that. Oh,
We had discussed that in one of the parking committee meetings of making some of the bigger lots into
everybody's got them on the app
long-term
now. Like
hours.
stop at Traverse City, pull them an app, here for 2 hours, 50 cents, whatever it is. Costco's got some of that stuff around. Traverse City's got it.
I think one of the problems with,
Be a way to bring in revenue.
one of the problems going down that direction is that I think the premise here, and Kathy, correct me if I'm wrong, was that people are more likely to buy these lot spaces if they know they have it secured for themselves. If we make some of these lots like on 3rd Street, Spring Street, a long-term pay by the hour kind of thing, people aren't going to park there because they're not going to pay when they can park elsewhere for free.
Correct.
So the idea is that there's business owners and maybe people who live in apartments that want to have a guaranteed spot. So that's
They're willing to pay for the
Yes.
guaranteed spot.
Yeah, so I see, Al, I definitely see where you're coming, that these spots may be empty for several hours, and that is a drawback. But if we do put meters somewhere, and if we're doing an hourly kind of meters thing, that's a totally separate discussion. The only place that would have to go is downtown, Main Street, 3rd Street, because those are where people want to park. That's where people will pay to park. People won't pay to park on an hourly basis on that 3rd Street, Spring Street lot when they can just park then somewhere else.
That's my feeling. The revenue opportunity comes from a guaranteed spot. I'm gonna pay because I know that spot's mine.
3 months out of the
And
year, you're gonna park, you're gonna pay because there's no place to park. So, I mean, you want to go downtown, you're
And
gonna
again,
pay it in summer.
as you said, Al, that was in the detail. Are these summer contracts? Are they yearly contracts? Is it a mix of both? It could,
Kathy?
We have not completely gone through all that, and you bring up some good topics. We do have a couple of options for both summer, which is when the bulk of the people have asked for spaces, but we do have some who've asked for year-round spaces for their employees. In the back of my head is a comment Nancy made at a meeting maybe a couple months ago now, when you were talking about short-term vacation rentals, is that she saw a lot of employees parking on 3rd Street, and why were we going to ask the vacation rental homeowner to not park on 3rd Street? We would hope that this would get people off of 3rd Street, and which would be beneficial to people who live there as well as those who work there. The details are not completely worked out. I can see some value, Al, in your comment about dinner parking, as long as we know that the people coming in for, let's say Jody's got 3 spots for her staff, that they have a place to park when they come in for their shift. I don't know how we control that, but if you give us direction, we'll go figure this out. We have presented to you a proposal based on the clicker because it's the most cost effective. There are other options that we've looked at that are quite more pricey, but we can go look at those.
Kyle, you had your hand up?
Nope.
Oh,
I guess is as many other new technologies that we've tried to put into town, we're gonna learn in the first year what we did right, certainly what we did wrong, and adjust accordingly.
well, that's a good point. One thing we have to make sure though is if it's if it's a 1 year, 2 year investment, the DDA will be putting in some money into this. So something we want to make sure that we know will last for some years, that we be behind because.
I didn't mean to imply we
Yeah.
would discontinue it, but we might refine how the contracts are issued or what
Okay.
the fees are, once word gets out. But doing it for a year to me is very low risk.
Kyle, is there anything out there that would help, that would kind of piggyback helping you with controlling traffic issues? And
No,
kind of
not
work
really.
into this?
I mean, it would be interesting to see if, let's say you charge $1,000 for 3 months of the year, how many people would actually step up and buy that permit? I'd be curious on that. How many employers, or, I mean, that's Matt, you're a business owner out there, would you pay your, I mean, I don't mean to do that. I don't want-
No, that's fine.
Would you pay,
I would not.
you'd make them walk?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I hate to say it, my sister worked in Lansing for the state of Michigan. She walked like 7 blocks and paid like $1,800 a month to park, just to park to walk 7 blocks, so. I would like that lot used. That's what I mean, one way or another, it does help us free up downtown's parking spaces.
And one advantage of the clicker system too is that we're trying to make sure that Kyle and his staff does not have to police this parking lot. If we do some kind of metered system or without a gate, then there's always going to be the potential of somebody pulling in there thinking, I'm going to be here 5 minutes to get a gurneys and end up being there for a couple of hours in a reserved spot. So we're trying to make it work for those who are releasing the spots to have access to those spots.
So, so far, I think, I don't know if we're at a consensus, 'cause I haven't heard Nancy speak yet, but what I'm gathering so far is that generally it's a good idea, but we need some more detailed plan. Nancy?
I'm fine with paid parking. I agree with you guys. I think, I'm not sure to just offer it to employees, but employees is the best way to go. But I'm fine with doing something with that lot that gives us some revenue.
Again, kind of, some of the rental, people that live, above the commercial.
So opening it up to more than just the business
Yeah.
owners.
If I might just briefly, what I'm thinking, what I'm hearing is this also has another side to it that could potentially turn into our vote list. Okay, how big of a draw is this going to be? Okay, I'll pay 15 grand for the whole parking lot for my family. I mean, we have people that would.
Yeah.
So if they, in those details, which is where that lives, how are we going to pick who, how, what our parameters going to be?
We throw all the names in a hat and draw.
And then we have to list them.
Lottery. Lottery.
One suggestion could be something simple like, one vehicle per household or X amount of vehicles per business and are allowed, something like that. That would limit that. And you have to show that you have to provide evidence that you have a business or a house here or in a downtown district, maybe. I mean, maybe you want to limit it to the CBD district. I mean,
Yes.
Kyle?
This was throwing out an idea, like, let's say for a year, we do permits and we just do like a dash permit. And we see how many people are gonna pay and it's work on us, but I'm willing to have our guys, like we give, like, let's say, Matt, you wanna buy a permit. And that way, that dash permit, doesn't matter if it's your employee A, B, or C, they can share that permit, you're buying that spot, and they put it in their dash. And if that car is not, and we put a sign up that says permit parking only, and then we sort of explore what happens in this summer as far as those permits go, how many people purchase a permit, we throw it on a dash, if there's no permit on a dash, sort of like what we do at Ford Park with a launch permit, then we write them a ticket. And I'm just thinking as I'm sitting here, that we sort of get the first year under our belt and see if it's worth doing the kiosk, see how many people pay $100 or $1,000 for a 3-month thing. Our guys can walk up there a couple times a day and check to see if, the only thing I don't want to have is somebody parks in parking spot number 17 and we need to go move that car. It's not going to happen. We'll write them a ticket and that would be it. I'm just throwing it out to save the DDA money up front just to see if it's going to work, but just throwing it out.
That's a great.
Thank you, Kyle. We had talked about that option and it was you and your staff that kept us from going down that path. It might be a good year one opportunity. We got to figure out the path on the dash option. Those can be easily duplicated, in a copy machine or we just have to, we'd have to work out a system, but it could happen. And that would save us the cost of the system until we know if it's going to work.
The long-term year-round, because St. John's Way does the same thing, we have permit parking in a lot of the lots, but it was year-round. And so when you start throwing permits in the dash in the winter, you can't see because of snow and frost. So if we're doing a 3-month permit thing down here for the summer, at least we know we're gonna be able to see it. I'm just throwing it out. I'm sorry to bring this up right now. I haven't really thought about it.
No. it's good
Again,
to have
Kyle, we were trying to protect you and your staff. There are some who've asked for a year-round pass. So you're right about the snow on the windshield, but we can figure that out as we get closer to snow season.
I do have a few comments on the chat. We have from Tim Knapp, there was a survey done and there were more than 19 spots that people showed an interest in paying for, which helps with revenue as well. For those that want it, helps raise funds and get some people off the street, and some apartments showed interest as well. The reader idea is interesting. The DDA could do the research and compare the differences. Is the system smart enough to reserve spots during the work hours? If you buy them, can we do a combination as a trial? Then Karen Stroud, are there other lots where this is being considered? And for that answer right now, Karen, that answer is no. We're particularly focused on this lot. It's one of the easier lots to focus on, in my opinion.
Well, part of the reason for that is that this lot is somewhat tucked back. It's not very visible by those visiting our community. So it's a good spot for employees. It's not like we're taking something vital away from customers. But no, we're not looking anywhere else. And again, the reason we're here is because we've been asked to look at this problem and see if we can find a solution. And if you,
I would suggest that based on what I've heard here is council's generally okay with the idea of you turn this into a paid lot, but we want to know the details, and maybe the DDA can work a little bit with Kyle to figure out a system for year one. Maybe it doesn't cost a lot of money, but as a trial year, if it works, bring back bring back those details of how we select people, how we select whoever gets the lot, bring those back to council for review at maybe our April meeting, and then try out year one without having to do any major expenses. And at the same time, then we'll also understand what kind of public feedback we'll get. This way a DDA doesn't have to commit to a $15,000 or more installation, and we don't have to commit to any kind of long-term closing off a public lot that might be detrimental. So.
The police department will incur the overhead. It makes a lot of sense.
We make the rounds to the 3 parallel spots right along that Spring Street up by the county. Anyway,
So there's a 5-minute walk.
yeah, I mean, they might not like me, but I'm out here. So.
It'll be a different kind of revenue.
It will. We're good with it. I mean, I'm just trying to save the DDA money up front. We might get into a year and say, okay, people don't want it, or this is a great idea, and then we go from there. But then also gets the permit thing gives the people opportunity to at least have that parking spot, whether a man buys a permit and he shares it amongst a bunch of employees, sorry, the mayor, or something like that. But at least those spots, what would kill me, or not kill me, but what upset me is to see 15 of those spots sitting vacant all day long. Because I know that there's people parked in the street that are playing a shell game, moving their car after we talk to come back and park in that same spot.
Just some last comment here from Tim Knapp. I like Kyle's idea as well. Something for the DDA to do more research and come back now that we have direction. I agree with Victor.
and we have a month. Your next meeting is not for 4 weeks, so we have plenty of time.
Is this something council's comfortable with, to hear a detailed proposal in a month?
Some more details.
All right.
Mayor, are you all right with that? You're owner down there, is it?
I don't think we should do anything to encourage employee parking downtown, and I think this encourages employee parking. But that just means, I think if you're gonna offer it to people, it should be, so the taxpayers before the employees get a shot at it.
And that, I don't care on that.
Yeah.
We can use a permit for them as well. I don't,
Right.
yeah, you guys can decide that.
The permit is independent about who's buying, independent from who's buying the permit.
Right.
Right.
So,
You know, it's not gonna solve the employee parking problem downtown, so
No.
why not give it to someone who really has a problem with parking?
Great.
Someone with a second floor apartment. and who's willing to pay a premium for that. It shouldn't be.
Good idea.
If we are going to do
Yeah.
paid parking, it should be at a premium.
Great. Let the market dictate.
Yeah.
We could do a silent auction.
Yeah.
Sorry.
DDA fundraiser, here we come.
Yes. Well, I think, Kathy, I think we have what we need. We don't need to vote on this, but I think there's a general consensus to come back with a detailed proposal and
We'll do that.
yep, and we'll look at that. So, all right, thanks, Kyle, for your contribution.
No problem. Speaking of parking, but down at Fort Park, so when Irish's building is complete, do we get all the parking places back at Fort Park?
Yes.
Well, I mean, could they take up, I mean, the Irish employees take up over half of the park.
They should be better this year.
It should be better. If we wrote more tickets, I'll have it when I do our, we wrote more tickets in Fort Park than we did any year that I've been, last year.
Well, because, I mean, majority of it, I think, was Irish's employees, taking up, definitely along the building. And
Well, they don't park along the building because those are, you have to have a trailer there. They took up the 5 or 6 spots on the inside. But they're there. Yep.
so I'm just curious,
Because they play the show game.
especially when we're gonna have the ferry coming back and, everything else going on, so.
Great. All right. Thanks for the direction there.
Thank you,
Kathy.
everyone.
Thanks, Kathy.
All right, moving on to item 3F, MPPA member authorized representative resolution. We did this when I first started. We authorized the city manager, the MPPA had an audit. They want the city manager's name. So really this resolution is just clarifying that the city manager is me and authorizing me to sign on behalf of you guys. So for this one, we'll need a roll call. So.
Motion that we authorize Victor to sign for the
All right, Nancy Rondell. John Cox.
Yes.
John Leo.
Yes.
Al Baker. Yes. Matt Rivera.
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right, thank you. 3G, this is FCC Diversion Resolution. So the CCE, our Central Dispatch Authority, is recommending that members pass this resolution, which supports more local control for the use of 911 fees. They want to align, they were asking the FCC to align the definition of the use of those fees essentially with the state of Michigan's definition. Michigan's rules allow the CCE to consider costs for radio systems, in-car computer networks, and other location services for first responders that are directly dispatched by the 911 center, while the FCC's only accounts for those radios and equipment that's in the CCE building itself. So what we want is an expanded definition that includes also our radios that are not just in the CCE dispatch building, but elsewhere too. So this resolution doesn't commit us to anything other than showing support for a change to that definition. And I don't know, Kyle, you support that? Yeah.
They want to take some of the funding away through the surcharge, which is that they're trying to, everybody trying to get in unison and oppose this.
Yep. So there's a resolution, and you saw that letter from Pam, who is the CCE director, Pam Woodbury, and we just have a short resolution based on their suggestions for council approval.
I would make a motion that we approve.
John Cox. Yes. Matt Rivera. Yes. John Leo.
Yes.
Nancy Rondell. And Al Baker.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Great, thank you. Moving on to 3H. So discussion about the override of Headley Amendment and uncapping the millage. Right now, so basically Jim Raymer, Clerk Whitaker, and I have been having bi-weekly meetings about, progressing with dealing with this potential ballot initiative for overriding the Headley Amendment. We're coming to council today, not for the specific language, but to resolve 2 questions. And the first one, so our goal, I should back up, our goal would be come to the May 3rd meeting for actual language, what we propose to be on the ballot. So we want to formulate that language, and to do that, we need council's direction on a couple things. The first one is, what rate should we ask the voters to uncap the millage to? Our charter allows us to uncap the millage to 15. However, 15 is a high number. You know, if people see that number 15, it might be, they might say, well, that's a large number. We don't want to uncap it to 15. However, the benefit of uncapping it to 15 is we don't have to go back to the public again for several years. Or does council want to take the approach of, well, let's be a little more conservative, uncap it to a smaller number, such as 9 or 10, what might be an easier number for the public to digest, but then we have to come back maybe, you know, every 5 or 6 years to ask for an uncap. So that's the first question. Obviously, there's benefits and drawbacks to that as I listed. The second question is whether we go to 15 or some smaller number, we would make a guarantee that we wouldn't raise the millage more than a half a mil each year. So let's say we uncapped it to 9 and we're at 6 this year. Next year, if we need to raise it to 6 for any project, which we're not saying we have to, but if there's something that came up that we would need to raise it, we promised that each year we wouldn't raise it more than a half a mil. So that was, including that language as a way to say, all right, you know, for any worries that some members in the public might have that, all right, they're going to uncap the millage to 10. Next year, they're going to raise our taxes to 10. We want to ensure the public that, no, that's not our intention. So those are the two questions I think we need to have answered. So that way, Jim and Nick and I can work on getting language. And so Jim or Nick, if there's anything you want to add to what I had just mentioned, please feel free.
Victor, the only thing I would say is, you know, if we're going to do this, I would just recommend you go for the full charter, you know, allowable, because that's what our charter permits us to do. And, you know, it's only as a result of the Headley Amendment that it's been reduced to the place that it is now. And I don't know, I'm just talking, but it just seems to me that whether we're going 10 or 15 is irrelevant, as long as you have this control governing restriction built into it that you can't, that city council couldn't raise it more than a half mil each year. So that's just my comment on the issue.
Nick?
And mine, just briefly, this whole exercise started not to raise taxes necessarily. It was to reflect it on, you know, years and years of the reduction fraction. It's gotten to the point I crunched some numbers that if we have a significant decrease in property tax values, we won't be able to adjust the property tax rate any to at least get back to where we are right now, because we're locked at 5.8 or whatever it is. So by uncapping, it says, okay, we can go 10, 12, 15, whatever we end up putting on the ballot, not meaning that that's where we're headed. Just if a year comes to us, you know, let's do the boardwalk, let's do something, a half a mil, we'll raise, you know, a couple $100,000 for that project, and it does not mean it has to be levied the next year. That's based on the budget cycle and what we would do in the truth and taxation hearing. So I agree with Jim that, you know, to start back at what the charter said here, then we don't need to come back. You guys know the schools do this every year, or at least every other year, just to keep that cap off. But if we get up there, it might be a harder sell to the voters because it's a complicated thing to understand. But it would save this conversation, my guess would be decades. We wouldn't have to deal with it again. I'll be gone, but it's just something long-term that I think needs to happen. Some fashion, way, shape, or form.
Limiting ourselves to half a mil a year, is that adequate?
Yeah, I think I did this rough calculation, a half a millage at current property tax rate brings in $139,000 to the general fund. So that being said, if, you know, things were going good and we didn't have any big expenditure projects going on, or even just $50,000, $60,000 projects, that half a mil we would be able to come up. We wouldn't have to, but we could, and then we could, you know, just make that would limit the increases in 1 year that what people would be absorbing.
Would the rate ever go down?
We can set the rate as long as based on what we need in that budget cycle. So say we went through the budget and did our truth of taxation and we needed $1.615 million. And I go through the calculation, this is the millage rate we need to get that to cover
expenditures in the general fund, that mill might be 4.5. The property taxes we may go down, but we have no option to go up. So once the values go down, we're locked. We're done.
So with the example of the boardwalk, if we needed to raise money to do the boardwalk, it could go up to cover that, and then if the
Well-
analysis said we don't need it the following year, it could come down.
Yeah, the millage is not really geared towards being earmarked for specific projects. That's not what the general operating millage is.
Right.
But unfortunately, a lot of the projects that I've been hearing for the last year and a half
Right.
have been parks and sidewalks and various things that are within the general fund purview.
Right.
So right now, we're not at that point. I just would really hate to see the city get 5 years down the line and have property taxes and values go down like they inevitably will.
Yep.
The values there, we're stuck.
Jeff, you had a,
Just to add to that, Nick, and if you remember, I don't know if it was a month or two ago that I put together a little graph when we talked about this before, and you could see the historical rise and fall of the millage rate that we actually collected. We had our maximum allowable, and then we had what we actually collected, and that was always lower than what we were permitted to do, and it would fluctuate up and down as the needs of the city change. And it's just been in the last few years that the maximum allowable has started to pull down what we could actually request.
yeah, that screen is on the, it's on the screen right now, yep.
And with this exercise for tonight, we weren't going to venture into all that too deep, but just because it's a confusing issue. But that, in my mind, tells me that we're locked on that blue line, color line, whatever, purple line. We're locked on that, and there's no way of going out.
I think it's going to take, and this is a little bit, it's about a lot of education.
Oh,
for the
yeah,
public
Absolutely.
To convince them of 9, 10, 12.
Whatever it may be.
Whatever.
And that's our next step.
Yeah,
As soon as
that's-
we get some direction, is putting together some way of making this understood to people, whether it be doing an interview with newspaper, I don't know.
Yeah, so that is something, once we get firm direction from council on what language we want to put on the ballot, which we hope can happen in May, then that's when we would implement and start our some sort of education campaign that would last through the summer. Jim Raymer did point out something that 2 months before the election, we can't advocate as city staff to vote one way or the other. So that's just election law. So we have to do a lot of our education from a city staff perspective during the summer. And then hopefully everyone's educated enough to then be able to have conversations outside here to speak to whom you want to speak about it. But from a city staff perspective, yeah. So Jim, I'm correct on that,
A
right?
lot of coffee groups in town.
It's primarily expenditure of funds, public funds within 60 days of an election that's prohibited. And that's been kind of, the thought is that because staff is compensated with public funds, that they should not be speaking, in favor of or opposed to any ballot issue within that 60-day period. So I think you're correct, but it's slightly broader than that legally.
So if I was on my free time, which I'm never on free time since I'm always a city manager here, so.
I've done quite a little research in the city's files, I guess, for lack of a better term, and this was brought to council somewhere between 8 and 2008, 11. My predecessor, Ron, I think everybody knows, he had brought this to the attention before, and it thankfully wasn't a necessity at the time, but since that time, it's just, his words are coming to fruition, if you will. So it's just a matter of what, if we want to go this path, what language should we put in this?
When I read through it, I came and thought about the implementation and what it means to the city. I arrived at the same conclusion that you and Jim Raymer did. Nancy, as you said, this is going to be a lot of education and explaining, and I only think we should do that once. Not we, but the city. If you need to go back and do it again, having done it once, it's going to be, well, why didn't you go for more when you knew that we were going to need it? You don't want to go. and I agree with what Jim said, it's not the absolute number, whether it's 10 or 15. It's the controls that we're going to put on it to ensure the taxpayer is comfortable with what the city can and will do to get to the numbers that it needs to be justified based on the budget analysis every year. So I would go, and the rationale would be, this is what our charter states the maximum should be. We're not asking to go to there. We want the ability to increase it by what are the rules that people will feel comfortable with.
And the 15 mils that was set my charter, I looked back as far as I could find paperwork. And if it was ever, it was, obviously it stated at 15 mils somewhere, but it would have had to be in the early 19 something when property tax values were, you know, maybe did enough to water down Main Street so it didn't get dusty. I don't know. Not a lot. But since then, it's been drastically dropping, and here we are.
So do
Do
we?
you need a motion? Or?
Well, I would at least consensus on that aspect of going to 15 and then adding this 1/2 mil control language in it.
I would support that. As long as you think a 1/2 mil is adequate.
Well, me personally, from looking at everything, you know, I might have to come and say, look, we just don't have the money to do this boardwalk right now. And I'll do that. But my goal, my focus on this is to get that cap off so that if something does drastically happen to tax values, we're not hindered.
But should
Whether we
we
decide
make that 1 mil so that we have enough room to fluctuate?
This is gonna be
I mean, what are you comfortable with?
I think it's gonna be a tough sell, even at half. To people, I think they might buy the 15 if you promise you won't do more than half a year. I think if you go for the 15 and you say we're gonna do 1 or 2 a year, I think it's gonna be a tough sell regardless.
Oh, yeah.
But however low of a number we can be okay with.
Well, regardless of what
yearly.
we think, it's him that runs the checkbook. that
Yeah, I mean,
ultimately.
right now, I'm not saying that the general fund is totally up and down,
No.
but I don't want to get to that point ever. And a 1/2 mil, okay, so it only generates $140,000 in revenue.
But we can keep the doors open for 140,000.
Right, so we just, okay, here's our goal, we're gonna do this $500,000 project at the end of next year. And we leave that at, 6.2 mils or whatever it is, and do it. And then the next year, we don't have anything on our radar, here's all I need to operate the general fund, let's go back down to 5.9. So just having the ability to do that is the key in this conversation to me. And then limiting it by the half, I think will give us a better opportunity to get it passed on the ballot. It's, as soon as people hear taxes, it's war.
I'd support it.
Yeah, say the 15. You get
Or it's
comfortable with
the
that, or so,
Something you just don't want to do twice.
Right.
Then we may end up doing what we did with our street village. We may end up having to do this to get it passed, but never does.
Right.
All right, so I do hear a general consensus then. So what we'll do then, so Jim and Nick and I will work the next month and a half to get language to the council at our first May meeting, and then a resolution we'll need. And then the process from there is we pass that over to the county, and then we just begin our education campaign. As Nick has pointed out to us in our little subcommittee that we have going on, is the county really doesn't do anything. It's up to us to make sure that our language is correct and legal. So, but the county has to have it on their ballot. So anyway, that's the process. So we're making progress.
And just so that everybody, now that I've really delved into this and done some research, looking at different cities across the state, how they do, this is common practice. And thankfully for the city, with our property tax values that we have here, we haven't had to do that. So we're pretty fortunate.
But this is consistent with what other municipalities are
Oh,
doing.
yes. Yeah, they just did it actually in St. John's where Kyle's from this recently too. So it's a common occurrence, but it's just not less.
All right, I think we're good on that one. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, council, on that.
Thank you, council.
All right, moving on to item 3I is Jeff's, as a zoning administrator, his quarterly report. Earlier this year, council had mentioned that they would like to see some more regular updates from the zoning administrator on some zoning issues. And so Jeff has provided you with a memo and some information about zoning reports. And so Jeff, if you want to explain a little bit about what happened so far in the month of February and March.
So a little bit of background on this was, we had a couple items that garnered some attention. They weren't necessarily, permits that were approved. And so there was the thought of seeing a little bit of what goes on behind the, on the phone, behind the doors, and that. And so through discussion, basically, it was just kind of stated some type of a, quick, simple listing of the types of issues that I deal with that don't necessarily become an approved application, such as somebody making a complaint, somebody, just bringing something, your questions, and where things lead to. So this is what I started putting together. It's pretty simple at this point. It's still new. I'm open to any suggestions or thoughts on what other information you would like to see.
You are coming in April next month with a annual
report. There
report.
is the annual report that one has more detail. That one will be a breakdown of all of the applications that have been submitted and approved, signed permits, zoning permits, planning commission activity, things of that nature. So that has a lot more detail and a breakdown of things that were approved. This is more to kind of look at some of the other things that don't necessarily turn into a permit directly.
The same format will be used to provide feedback to the planning commission?
Yes. What I've shared with you guys, I will be sharing with the March planning commission.
One thing I'd love to see, this is a great start. I mean, this helps a lot to see where things are, just maybe down the road, once this becomes more of a routine for you. When you say zoning questions or zoning complaint, maybe just a little bit more specific. Like, are the zoning questions usually about setbacks? Is that where people are having the most issues, is that the setbacks are too big or too little or whatever? Not every tiny little thing, but just a few things that zoning questions is a huge.
Well, and there is a follow-up there, zoning questions regarding, so I've tried to put some detail to that without getting too specific. So one thing I do want to caveat here with this is I am getting a little bit of pushback from people. People are less willing to come forward and ask questions of me, worrying that there's going to be some report of some issue that they're dealing with. Not necessarily on, let's say, some small project with somebody that's asking questions about a setback, but let's say that somebody wants to work on a project and they don't want anybody to know what they're working on yet. And now they're having questions of, should I come to you because is this going to be included in the report? So that's a little bit of the reasons why names are left off with this report, and I'm trying to be not too specific with the nature of the request.
How would they know about this report?
Because they attend planning commission meetings and city council meetings.
Oh, interesting. What would the concern, no, well, obviously, I wouldn't want to know names or specifics until they come out into the
Well,
public view.
he makes a good point, because I've done 4 fire inspections on some potential projects around here.
Right.
And, I mean, they're not there yet, but they're gonna be there yet, and they don't want anybody to know what's going on, whether it's a tenant in a building or different, they just don't want.
But from
They
a top,
don't want it to be in public.
but from a top level, there's no way to know who, what, when, where, or why on these. It's just a summary of, this is what people are asking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even give it like the address, like I just pulled up 609 State, because I want to know where it was. Bed and breakfast, so I want to see what building it was.
Well, maybe that's not something that
So
necessarily
I
needs to
mean,
apply.
that makes sense for some people that don't want to know what's going on.
Maybe the address isn't important.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just thinking,
That information right there, kind of, these are some
This-
questions.
Just
that you had.
this,
That'd be perfect.
Yeah.
Why?
When we talked about this,
Added information, then you're
Yeah.
still being
confidential.
I just completely, I went straight to the why. I didn't even really focus on the address. Leave the address up. We certainly don't, in doing this, and I'm pretty sure the planning commission would agree, we don't want to we don't want to put a halt on anybody doing anything.
Well, I want
I
to
just want to understand.
Feel comfortable asking questions.
Yeah, we still want people to come and ask a question. So absolutely.
But it's an informational thing of just what are people looking for? What are they asking about? What's important to them? Trying to, and I think it all ties into even to the master plan.
Right.
Whole study, but it doesn't really, I guess the address is super important.
I
But
think,
really,
yeah,
when they say what kind of zone
Right.
is it, and I go ask you, this one was this in R1 or R2, whatever.
There may be some purposes for this that the address may be important. And maybe I'll list the addresses on some things and not others. For instance, if we get zoning complaints about activity, I think that might be beneficial to have the locations of those so that we can see if it's a repeat complaint about the same property or if it's different complaints throughout the city. Short-term rental is a great example. If we're getting a lot of complaints about one certain specific location, then it might not be short-term rentals as a general topic that's an issue, and just the activity that's going on at that site. Whereas if we're getting lots of short-term rental complaints scattered throughout the city, then it may be something that we want to change in our city code of how we handle short-term rentals. So that might be a use where we're seeing the.
But maybe
address
not
would
so
be
much in the
beneficial.
public report.
Right.
Because if I were concerned that I didn't want somebody to know what I was gonna do, and you would say, well, I might put your address in or I might not, then I probably wouldn't come to you.
Okay.
We don't want to discourage.
No,
Yeah.
no, I wanna know what people want. That's really what the purpose is.
Keep 2 sets of books.
Let's
So-
just give us the center section.
well, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Maybe give the center section and maybe a tally, maybe just like a number tally of 3 setback questions,
Yeah.
5 bed and breakfast or whatever. And then
Right, right.
that, I think that would be,
That
No,
would
you
be,
need, you need that level of detail. Just don't publish it.
I think that would serve the purpose of what we're looking for.
But as Nancy said, it's a great first start.
Yeah, yeah.
Something.
Thank you.
We'll continue to grow it and evolve it as.
all right, thank you, Jeff. We will move on to 3J, which is a purchase of a new police vehicle. This was in our CIP. We had slated $50,000 for a new Ford 3.3 utility, Ford utility, right? That's what they're called. Yeah, Ford utility. So Kyle did a lot of research into this, and he did a lot of research that I necessarily didn't share here because I summed it all up in this graph and this memo here. But essentially, there's 2 options: a 3.3 liter and a hybrid liter from 2 different dealers. One is located here, Ford Brown in the Harbor Springs area, Emmett County, and then another is from Owasso. And the one from Owasso had a better deal, and they were willing to work with Kyle on lowering that. So Kyle talked to them to get it lowered, and I don't think Brown was willing to go any lower than they had offered. So I looked at our purchase policy. We're allowed to give a 5% adjustment for if they're a local company, they can be 5% more expensive, and I could recommend that because they're local. But in this case, they were about 6%. And so higher, so the local exemption per policy doesn't apply, and my recommendation is going with the lowest. The lowest is from Owasso, from Signature and Owasso. However, the real question here is for us is, going with the hybrid or the 3.3 liter. The hybrid is $3,000 more expensive. However, as I laid out in the memo, the advantages are in the long-term savings on gas. You could potentially save over the lifespan, which is a 5 years typical police vehicle, $5, $6, $7 or more $1,000 in gas savings. So really that takes it down to below $50,000 for the overall cost. And I think it also looks well on the city as we're moving toward, solar panels as well as electric vehicle charging stations, to have at least one vehicle on our fleet to test it out, to see how a hybrid vehicle works. And if it does it really save money on gas, does it, and et cetera. So that would be my recommendation, is to go with the hybrid version for 54.6 from Signature, and then to have the police department just do a few month trial analysis of what are the gas, how much are we spending on gas for 10,000 miles into a hybrid vehicle and how much are we spending for gas and 10,000 miles in another vehicle and see really what are the savings. So I'll just hand it over to Kyle to just explain a little bit more about what he went through for this.
Well, I hadn't really, number one is that normally when I come into a budget price on capital improvement plan, I like to stick below that price. Last year we did by a significant amount. When I went to Victor and I budgeted in the CIP plan $50,000, and all of a sudden I hadn't explored the hybrid at all. I went to the conference down in Grand Rapids and they promoted it down there, and I talked to Signature about it. Signature has sold a lot of police vehicles throughout the state. It's in Owasso, but they have the MI deal, so they get the state bid for police vehicles. So that's why it's significantly less on that. So I hadn't thought about the hybrid, went down there, they were promoting the hybrid. So it sort of got me thinking with us going with the solar panels, stuff like that. I came back, talked to Victor about it, and I thought it might not be a bad idea to at least explore, see what happens for one car. I don't care either way. I mean, to me, I just want a new police car, but I think it would be a good thing to try. They said in there, I got their data here, that 61% of the police cars set idling, 61% of the time they're idling, and that's where they feel that it would really benefit us as far as the idling, because it goes off of the electric and not off the engine. So when I talked to the gentleman about Harbor Springs in particular, we don't have like a 55-mile-an-hour area. We're going to go 55 and we're going to slow down, so we're going to create a lot of energy that way. So that might be on the flip side of the negative thing for us, because we're basically 25, 30. But you create that energy every time you brake, from what I'm told. The hybrid comes with a warranty, an 8-year, $100,000 on the hybrid components, which I was pleased to hear because it's sort of a new concept. So that will be covered for at least extended the period of our car. And then the other thing that threw me over was our computers. As we are replacing vehicles, I like to replace the computers. The computers in our cars, the whole city basically does a lot of work for the computers. Our computers are dying. We replaced the one last year and then 2019, or 2 years ago, and I would like to do it again with this car. That gets us up to speed. So that would put it up to the $54,639, $4,000 above, or $4,500 above my CIP.
So we normally don't, every time we get a new police vehicle, we normally don't also change out the computer at the same time. It's just been happening the last 2 times, and it kind of makes more sense though now, you know.
Why they got their hands in it, we
yeah.
get it done, and it's up to speed. And so hybrid, and then I did go to Browns because there was a significant difference in the prices, and I like to shop locally. You know, and I explained to them, I said, is there anything that you can do here? You know, I want to be honest with them. And so I'd say, this is what we have. And he said, no, this is where we're at. So,
You have to plug it in.
No, this isn't
like an electric car. Basically, when you guys probably John knows better, but when you brake and the car slows down, it generates electricity. And there's a large battery in this car, so it either runs on gas or electricity. Right. But when you're like doing slow driving in the city, hopefully it would be on electricity and not on gas. And when I spoke with Victor, what I'd like to do is take one of our current cars and see how much gas we're putting into it, and see the hybrid, see how much gas we're putting into that, so I can come back with you in like 3 months and say, okay, it was a good idea or it was a bad idea. But it's your guys' and the city's money, so I really don't care.
I do think
a lot of hybrids, so it's not for what you guys do around here. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, it's a good match to what you do. I mean, 61% idling.
We do a lot.
Hybrid is perfect for
Yes.
that. Because the engine shuts down, and you go off the battery. It's perfect.
And some of the mutual aid calls you go on, you get up to speed on State Road.
Yeah.
Or on 119, it's not that big a deal.
Right, we'll make that. I mean, we'll do what we need to do, and
I would make a motion to approve your recommendation.
I'll second that. Thank you again for all the work you put in. You and Victor are very detail oriented.
I didn't, like I apologize for being over between the computer and the hybrid. It's like on my phone.
we will come in under in 6 years.
So, yeah.
No more bullets for you.
But thank you for.
Yeah, I do think that's a long-term savings. It's a small save, but it's a long-term savings, and especially with, and I know we don't know what.
Fuel costs right now.
Yeah, I mean, they went up from $2.15 to $3 almost. So you imagine if gas goes back up to $3.50, $4, and this is exacerbated savings. If it goes down to $1.50, obviously then it's not as exacerbated. So anyway, but we have a motion and a.
This Jack Cox. Now legal.
It's probably time.
Nancy run down. Matt, you're up.
Yeah.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it, guys. Item 3K, electric department service and work order fees. As you probably saw, these are not our electric rates. These are work order fees. So when someone wants to install a meter, needs the electric department to do something on their property regarding their electric service. These are the fees we're talking about adjusting the fees. They haven't been raised in at least 13 or 15 years, as long, I think it's been since Denny Ori was here previously. So not the Denny before the Denny. So what Dan Huey did, our electric supervisor, was went through the fees, basically adjusted those where he felt that, you know, we weren't really making up the money that it costs staff to actually spend the time. You know, if you're looking at $200, that's really about, you know, maybe 2 hours of 2.5 hours of work. And sometimes it costs more than that. Not only does it cost them the time to do the work, but their duties that it takes them away from. So then they have to pick up those duties elsewhere. So really, we're not talking about major changes, or some light increases for hookup fees for 100 and 200 amps from $150 to $200, overhead and URD temporary services from $75 to $150. We've included, you know, $3 from $2 per transformer to $3 per transformer there, and $150 to $200 for a duplex, fourplex. And then changing the PVC conduit price will be determined at installation, because that price is very unstable, the one of how much it is per foot. Similar thing with the 3-phase, increase that to $9 a foot. And then this net metering fee is not a new fee. It's just taking something that we already approved a year and a half ago and putting it on this work order fee, so people understand that they have to pay a fee to apply for us to put in net metering. And so those are the brief changes. Yep. Not drastic.
Motion to approve this, it's right in line with Great Lakes. I just dealt with them on service stuff, Overland Electric and UP, same thing.
Mhm.
These numbers are right in line with
I'll second that.
other stuff, so
That makes sense. Now the review cycle will be shorter than 15 years going forward.
I hope so. I hope so.
Motion in the second, Nancy round down.
Yes.
Matt Micah.
Yes.
Matt O'Gara. Yes. John Dale.
Yes.
John Cox. Yes. Motion carried.
Great, thank you. Moving on to, yes, 3L, last agenda item, formation of personnel committee for city manager evaluation. We had, I talked to John Leo earlier about this, we did have a personnel committee earlier, but council changed. So just a formality here to come back to council to reform that personnel committee. Before it was the mayor, John Leo, and then Clerk Whitaker serves on that kind of committee as well. But really, and you know, my recommendation would be stick with that. I mean, both of them have been here since I first started if we're doing a city manager evaluation, but that's just my suggestion. But of course, we would come to the April 19th meeting. Personnel committee would have some recommendations on whether or not to extend the contract and salary and et cetera. And then we'd have that open public meeting at that April 19th meeting for the evaluation. And the contract does, I didn't include it here, but does call also for some goal setting. So I think that's something that we probably should just do. I mean, as a council changes, but at least for this council, you know, what are the goals in the next coming up year? And I think that's something we should just focus on, or do as I'm doing. I mean, that's up to you guys, but I think that's something we should just at least have I know we've talked about different issues from housing to parks to, you know, the downtown. So what are the goals that you want to focus on? And that should be part of this evaluation as well.
We get a little tiny bit of background from this. I started this process pretty much almost a year ago. Get the personnel committee, and then they went awry.
Decided it was not the right time to
Well,
yeah.
and you know, he was supposed to come a year ago. And then, you know, here we are again, but there's some things that I've gotten from Michigan Municipal League in different places that score part, I guess, the previous council that don't know. So Well, that's the kind of thing, and I did research on wages, comparables in that area, work, so maybe we ought to reinstate that, and I send that back out and start again, and then the personnel committee can do their thing.
That makes sense to me.
Sounds good.
So stick with the mayor and Councilmember Leo.
Yeah,
Yep.
makes sense. We were both here when we hired you, so we should both be here when we fire you. Just like that. Happy Monday.
Wow.
Zoom meeting's better.
Make sure you stop in tomorrow for dinner.
Yes, yeah. No, that sounds good to me.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I like the idea of the future goal plan.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of things to include that in discussion.
All right, so I don't think we need any action then if we stick with the same personnel committee. All right, thank you then. We'll be back on April 19th for that.
Don't thank us yet.
Oh, well, thank you that we're doing an evaluation.
Oh, okay.
Denny, I hear you laughing.
I'm laughing. I'm having a good time.
Thanks, Denny. All right, city manager's report, really quick. We've created new events, thanks to Denny here, events on city property tab under the Marina and Recreation tab. It's a new page that has a calendar for all events on public property. So that way we can see, when and where people are having a party on Zorn Park or having an event at, Marina Park. So this is, you can access all the details on this calendar. So it's very useful. So appreciate Denny for doing that. We are getting close to ready to putting out our sidewalk RFP for the sidewalk project, the $50,000 project, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Benchmark and Lucas are finalizing details on that. It would be for up to the contractor to decide, when they want to do the sidewalk repair. So it could be spring, it could be fall. It's going to be a year-long, basically, project. They can do it how they want, just because we have more sidewalks. A couple other things that I think came up. One was we have to look into this, but according to the Cranes Detroit newspaper, we are likely to be receiving $118,000 in stimulus money for the COVID. And we got to still look into exactly how we can use the money, but it seems like it's pretty broad. So we'll have to figure out when we get that money, how we want to use it. I mean, we had some talk, I talked with Nick and some suggestions, and maybe we could use some of that money for, improving outdoor space and maybe hand washing stations, maybe some more things to retrofit to the new times, but I don't think it'll cost us $120,000 to do all of that. So we'll have some extra money we can just put away in our general fund if it comes to fruition, which I think it is, but,
Well, it sounds like
but I just haven't seen anything like, here's a letter. Hey, you guys are getting money.
numbers all over the place.
Yeah.
They had one number stated they were getting $11 billion paying out of it. So these numbers that are coming out are not necessarily accurate. So we are on the hook for some money, but depending how much.
Yep. The last thing I have is that I didn't include, I just came today, is that I talked to John Cups about this because he's a fire chief, is that because of the warm weather, we might be doing an early install on the fire department for the solar panels. There could be end of March, early April install. So we're going to hope to maybe have some sort of publicity surrounding that. Hopefully we can get people to come. It might be a little cooler still, but maybe some food, sandwiches. I'll have Andy looking at that. Just be a little fun event. So hopefully we get that going soon. Yeah. So far I've been very, very impressed with our solar installer there. They've been very diligent. They've been very orderly and timely in getting us information. So far impressed with their work. And yeah, basically the managers meetings and the boards of commissions have been pretty much standard stuff, MPPA stuff. The planning commission reviewed the master plan. We haven't gotten all the way through the master plan goals and objectives. We're still working, chugging away. And DDA obviously brought to you the 3rd Street. Something that Andy had brought up to me, which I think might not be a bad idea going forward. I do have board and commissions recaps in here, but in other communities, a lot of time the council member who serves as that board member also does some kind of oral recap of what happened at that meeting. So if you're a DDA rep, you come to council under this boards and commission sessions. All right, DDA, this is what we did. This is what happened. Here's my perspective. Planning commission, So I don't know if that's something that you want to do. I think it's a good idea just because you guys are the reps, you're acting in, the council's interest on those boards. So just something to keep in mind going forward under the boards and commissions section.
Council meetings, before that.
We did that years ago.
And I'm guessing it probably got kind of cumbersome, but
It does get a little
It's so
cumbersome.
interesting, if I wanted to know what was going on. I could read the minutes, and if I had a question, I would bring it to the rep at the table at the next meeting.
and it either whatever direction we may head with that, as far as info, I think it's a good
That'd be
idea.
kind of neat though. So you kind of, it kept me in the know.
Well,
really
anyway,
good.
Yeah, if there's anything.
the sewer authority is going to have some looting issues coming out that we need to be, everybody needs to be aware of.
So it's just an idea. We don't have to make a decision here. I just want to let you know that's something that we've talked about here. I think it's a good idea to,
Well, in your packet, it's laid out very nicely, table of contents, stuff like that, so. If it's not a big deal to add the
yeah.
minutes,
Well, you're not putting on paper, so include that.
yeah, everything's electronic now, so. It's not that big a deal, it's not a bad idea.
So whatever, we'll work on that. We'll work on that.
If you want to read it, if you don't, right?
There just might be a situation where we have a meeting on a Monday and the planning commission met on that Thursday. The minutes obviously aren't done yet. So but we can still, but that's why I was saying giving a recap by a council member, because they would have been there without the minutes having been done yet. They can still give a recap of what happened at that meeting. Just a little more efficient. So just a thought, but so that's what I have. Obviously Kyle's report is in there. Kyle, is there anything you want to mention about anything from the police report?
When you were talking about Victor's evaluation, I just got in on the evaluations with all of our employees, and we just got finished them off after the details tonight. And I asked them 4 questions at the end, if there's any equipment that we need put on a wish list. And 3 of the employees over there showed appreciation for and I'm not blowing smoke, they showed appreciation for the equipment that we have. And I looked while we were sitting here after you talked about that, in the state of Michigan, there was 23 police officer jobs posted since the 1st of March. So these guys that work over here could go anywhere if they wanted to get a job. And by them feeling appreciated by you guys giving us the stuff, the equipment that we need, you don't know how far it goes. I mean, Josh, the other day I asked him, Josh has been here 21 years. I said, Josh, any equipment? He said, the council's been really good about getting us what we need. We have what we need. And so I just want to relay that to you guys, that these guys can go anywhere and get a job right now, because nobody wants to be a cop right now. And so the fact that I feel like I have 5 great full-time employees that want to stay here right now is very beneficial, and it's the support that you give. So thank you. You don't know what it means on my end over there. And I'm not saying one of them might not leave tomorrow, but not to be having to look all the time, because they can go somewhere else and make more money or get better benefits. And the fact that they want to stay here is partially to do with the support they get from you guys. So thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Thanks, Kyle. Great. And so that leads us to boards and commissions, but our city council, new and old business. Let me see if we have any public comments left. Looks like an old, oh, never mind. Old one from Denny. We have lots of needs and so much potential. Let's bet on our future and be great. I think that was the millage discussion. So thank you, Denny.
You're welcome.
Check YouTube. I see none. Anyone from the audience? They're all 75% of staff.
All right. Call it a meeting.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you, council.
Thank you, Jim.
Right, Jeff?
Good night, everyone.
Good night.